So let me start anyway. I'm just going to go off on one for a little bit. And it's just to say that it's only a few more days until Her Majesty the Queen releases a few disingenuous phrases about the nation and the old folk, who are sold on her. And the nationalists, of course, that support her having a royal wank. But I can now see what the parasitic royals are trying to do with their messages. But you can't fool me. So we're living in the 21st century, yet we still pay for a German family to live like kings and queens. See what I did there? Okay, and there are many obvious misconceptions that support them, and I'm about to spill the beans. So, let's talk about it. So the royal family represent the British people and the United Countries. And first of all, they're of German heritage, and they were never elected, and they rule by succession. And that's a system that most European countries got rid of and ousted their royal families. They're paid for by the people, which is still anti-democracy at its best. Nobody was given a choice. And after 60 years, can you name even one line from any speech that the Queen has given that has inspired or comforted you? And the family successfully lobbied to have themselves completely removed from our freedom of information laws very soon after it was revealed that the Queen was applying for grants which were meant for low-income families, and she did that to cover the cost of heating at her palaces. And the protection offered to them by the Freedom of Information exemption means that we can never truly know what happened or how much money they took. And the elected Parliament has to ask permission of the Queen and of the Prince Charles before they debate anything that might involve them. And although this level of secrecy and inequality could well be representative of Britain, it still doesn't make it right. And when the Queen receives 38 million for offshore wind farms, because she owns the seabeds, we know we're being held back in what should be the long-forgotten past. And then there's a tourism myth. So tourism will not cease without them. And at the end of the day, people are simply looking at a closed palace. It's the architecture and the history that really draws people to these sites. And the uninhabited palaces in France, for example, are some of the biggest tourist attractions in the world. And I'm sure the UK palaces would also generate massive income if they would open them to the public and charge an entrance fee. And the UK ranks number 7 in the world for the amount of tourists visiting per year, with 29 million people. And interestingly, France, who removed their royals, is number 1 on the list with 79 million visitors per year, followed by the USA, Italy, Turkey, and none of them have any monarchies. And the Palace of Versailles in France is the number 1 tourist attraction with the highest amount of visitors and money generated. And on the other hand, the top 5 attractions in Britain were the British Museum, the Tate Modern, the National Gallery, the National History Museum, and the Science Museum. And none of the top 10 is related to the royals. And if there is any money generated, then it's through the buildings, not the actual royals themselves. And the royals actually make money through the Crown lands. No, that's a common misconception. Although money does come in, and I did talk about the Crown in a separate show when I talked about the separation of the British Empire and the Crown Empire, there is money coming in, but that's the state's property. It's not theirs. The royals handed it back to the state in return for annual grants, and if they were to be abolished, they wouldn't stand a chance in court of ever regaining this land. And are we really supposed to believe that they're doing Britain a huge favour by allowing us to have their land? And it would be good to remember the fact that all of this land was gained by the rulers through the right of conquest, so they should have returned it back to the people anyway. And another argument that is commonly used is that the royal family only costs 40 million a year, which they say is 65 pence per person. And there are inaccuracies here. The 40 million is for the Queen, and it doesn't include the cost of policing, security, and state visits around the world, amongst other things. And the true cost will never be known, because once again, they live behind the Freedom of Information exemption. So what are they hiding? Who knows? And there's another argument as well. People say, oh, but everyone else gets an inheritance. Why shouldn't they? But this isn't an issue of inheriting a family's private money. The issue is inheriting a perpetual amount of taxpayers' money forever. Generally, most people agree that hereditary power is never a good thing. When anyone else's parent passes away, the children don't inherit their state pension for the rest of their lives. So why should the royals, ordinary people, pay inheritance to them when they receive money from all other sources? It's just wrong. So, setting aside these issues, there is a main problem of democracy and inequality. Nobody can tell their children that they are being brought up in a wholly equal and fair society where there are unelected figures receiving millions of pounds through taxes every single year simply because they were born in the right family. We fight wars around the world to promote democracy and oppose unelected leaders. But this is extreme hypocrisy while we have an unelected family with political influence and taxpayers' money. And this is also ignoring the fact that the actual cost is huge. For example, celebrations such as a royal wedding, which cost 20 million in security alone and is estimated, even by the Telegraph, to have cost the economy 5 billion through lost revenue. And although the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, that very same year, in the middle of the longest economic crisis since before Second World War, cost everybody between 1.2 and 3.6 billion with the loss of revenue. So it seems that most people are blinded from reality by the comforting sweet old lady sitting on a throne and the aesthetically pleasing new princess and her husband expecting their first, second child. No, they had, I don't know, they followed the royal family. Their wedding that cost us dearly, and they sell us the image of their son, way back risking his life, in a war zone and so on. And I imagine he's protected. They wouldn't just send him out like any other soldier. And it makes England pretty much an embarrassment of the world for all this. And there's much more I can say about the royal family, but I'll leave it at that for now. I'd recommend you do some research on how the money's sent to them, how they're scrounging off of the state through welfare and making these claims. And there's a lot of stuff that's hidden, as I've mentioned before, because the Saxe-Coburg Gotha family, German, who are now called the Windsors, hide behind the Freedom of Information Act. They're exempt from all of it. So, the Queen's speech, 3 o'clock, if you're up for it, December the 25th. But personally, it's an anti-democratic system, and I'd give it a miss. OBG.